Well, I've been great, just in Los Angeles for the time being. In the sort of workshop dojo, you can see all of, I always call these the pots and pans behind me because I'm in here every day, just workshopping music and developing new things, developing new instruments. So I've had in lieu of everything that's been going on worldwide, I've had a really amazing past 9 months just to be able to be inside developing music. So much of what we do historically happens on the road. Most years I'm on the road 9-10 months out of the year. But this year we've been inside. So we've got 4 new records lined up. I have to decide how we're going to release them and, what order they're going to come out and when and all of that. But just excited to be inside and actually have the time to develop things. So yeah, it's been going amazing. Yeah, with Axiom, we had so much fun because it's, again, so many of the most recent albums have been sort of studio records, right? So a lot of editing, is happening in the studio in terms of like putting a bunch of the layers of rhythms and different things like that to sort of, it's more, the records have been designed more from the sonic architectural space rather than, like a creative improviser and a practitioner in that kind of cultural space, cultural music. And so this record has really been a lot of fun because a lot of the things that people were conjecturing that we were doing in the studio, you can hear us doing in real time with no editing, right? So that component of it is always great when you have the opportunity to illuminate different facets of not just your compositional acumen, but also, the relationship between the players in real time. So I think what people are enjoying about that moment is to hear the interplay, the dialogue, and how we actually communicate, which is, it reads differently than when it's a studio record, right? And so, I think the Grammy component to it and being nominated again, my first nomination was in 2006 with a record called Rewind that you may remember, but it's there was like a 12-year gap. The category that I was nominated in first was Best Contemporary Jazz Album. And then they got rid of the category, right? And so then the next one was in 2018, which was Best Contemporary Instrumental, which kind of was a hybrid of the Best Contemporary Jazz record in some other categories. But this year has been really fun because I got my first traditional jazz nomination. And so, we got the nom for Best Contemporary Instrumental Album, but also for Best Jazz Solo. And, as a New Orleanian, a person that's born in the neighborhood where the music is actually seated, and a person that, considers themselves to be sort of piously related to the beginnings of this music and the actual canon and history of this music, vernacular of this music, and all of those things, the languages of this music. It's really cool to me and to a lot of my friends to finally get the nomination in the traditional space, because even though the music that we're making comes from trying to create a genre-blind sound as a means of like extending a sort of cultural communal dialogue into as many spaces as possible, to get the look for something that you're creating that comes from your specific cultural musical exhibition is really, really, it's just, I'm honored, It's funny because it's like my entire life, since I'm like 13 years old, has been traveling, going to every, there's a jazz festival in every city, corner, town, and, that's one of the things that's really great about it being one of the first highly disseminated cultures of music in the world. But I will say, after spending decades on the road and going to all of these really exotic and amazing places and learning, all these things, there's nothing like New Orleans. I don't know what it is. You go back home and you're just like, the air there, it's like you get off the plane and you feel it's like you're in a completely different world, and so for me, to be able to return home, and hopefully this year to be able to return home with some hardware that speaks to what all of our predecessors have built there, is going to be really, really amazing. So my fingers are crossed for it all. The sort of approach to these records has been really mixed because there's so much content. There are maybe 22 tracks that most of what you're hearing is me playing. So like Ancestral Recall, and maybe a little bit of the Emancipation Procrastination. Maybe 80 to 90% of what you hear on those recordings is actually me playing all these instruments. So if you hear the roll of drums, it sounds like Awe drumming or Akan traditional drumming, or some rhythms that come from places like French Guyana and the Siam Akan, these sort of things being mixed with my own cultural sort of exhibition, being a Black Indian chieftain from New Orleans, and obviously we have our own rhythms. So most of what you're hearing on those recordings is actually me playing the chorus of drums and the sort of questions and answers in the rhythms. And then I'll bring in a person like Weedy Brahma or Munir to come in and play solo leads on them to communicate with the trumpet. So the first two of these four records, the bulk of that music is actually recorded in the room that you're looking at right now, right? So it's me in here playing Achimevu or Protobaz or Sangba and Kinkani and all these things, and also playing Doso Ngoni and Kamala Ngoni. I'm developing a new instrument here that's a hybrid of a Kamala Ngoni and a Grava chord, a Grava sort of template instrument. So a lot of the music that's on those records is really me kind of still going through that process that was seeded with Ancestral Recall, where it's like I'm grabbing things that I know come from these sort of spaces, whether it's Mande or Wusulu music from Mali or something like that, and incorporating those things into creative improvised context. But some of the things that are coming up are just coming up, right? So it's like, and that's what we like to refer to as the ancestral recalling of it, right? So those records sound like that, but then there's another two records that's the production methodology is really mixed. So it's like I may send it to like Lisa. I may send it to like Lisa and Naomi Abi, the twins, a Cuban group, and say, listen, I got this rhythm sounds like maybe like Bombay Plena music from Puerto Rico. Can you find something to mirror it and blah blah blah? And so we're mixing things like artists like Somi or people like Sarah Elizabeth Charles, these sort of artists. And so they'll be sending things back. And so we have a lot of back and forth and we build records in that way. But then the third way and the most fun way for me is to be in the studio with my band, right? So anytime we have sessions, I'm like grabbing all of this stuff and bringing it into the studio, and I'm there, and it's like Corey Fonville has his setup, Elena Pender Hughes is on flute, and so, to be able to mix the things that I do in layers in my home with my actual band in real time with the trumpet is the most fun version of this, right? Because they all also have the ability to be able to speak in these ways because we workshop music together, we train together, and so we work on what it is that we're doing. So to be able to do it in real time, there's nothing like that. And I think the final record will kind of hearken to that energy more. So it'll be a hybrid of like an Ancestral Recall and an Axiom kind of together. Stretch music is the term that a lot of younger musicians in jazz music were calling the music that we were making, about a decade ago, so basically from like 2009 to 2014, seemed like everywhere we went on the planet, we could be in Bulgaria and the kids would be like stretch music, and so we started to try and figure out what it was that they were actually saying in those moments. Like, what does that mean? Because we understood what it was that we were doing and it being an extension of a sort of fusionist concept that this is certainly not the beginning of, right? You can look at, jazz music in general is a fusion, right? So in that you can point to 100 years ago and they were fusing all of these different sort of elements of different cultural expression in music. So we wanted to try and understand why they were saying what they were but through that moment, when we started to excavate what we were really doing and what we were intentionally doing, part of what we realized was that we were creating something that was rooted in a creative improvised or jazz kind of space, blues space, but that was really intentional about creating a genre blind approach to expressing in music, right? So I know that that's a long-winded way to say part of it. There's so many tentacles to this at this point. But the idea was to unify everyone in one understanding, which is that sound and anything that a human being creates musically is valid because they are valid. So it is essentially a template to also decolonialize sound, right? And the spaces of music, right? So a huge part of this is that most of the practitioners in this culture of music come from cultural spaces where, they're deeply rhythmic people, and usually those cultures of music have sort of belittling and pejorative nomenclature around them historically, right? So for musical cultures that are more rhythmic as opposed to more melodic or more harmonic cultures, the terminology that surrounds them is usually a little different, right? And that ends up leading into the way that we disseminate these forms to children, what they learn in music, right? So most kids that grow up in America that learn music will say that they had a class where they learned a little bit about melody and harmony, but most of them don't have those equivalents in rhythm, right? So you can line up 200 musicians and say, did you have a class where you dealt with rhythm? And they'll say no, right? And so part of what we also realized was that we were building a community of artists and musicians that were rhythmically deficient because of pejorative and belittling ideas about other cultures, specifically Africanity, right? And so the more that you keep them away from those spaces, the more rhythmically deficient, which means they communicate at a level that is not akin to other cultures, right? So I can bring a musician from Ohio into Cuba, but he can't really play with those guys because they are as rhythmically sophisticated as they are harmonically and melodically. So the utility of the culture of sound obviously has many tentacles. But so basically what we were doing is working on trying to create a sound that really crossed all borders and married as many different or seemingly disparate cultural groups of music together in one space. The record label component to that, or the Stretch Music app component to that, those things were things that were being built because it was also important to us while we were doing this work to try and build a sense of community and to build a space in our industry that also allowed our musicians to hold on to all of their equity. So anyone that signs a Stretch Music deal owns their masters, right? So, we have David Sanchez, Grammy Award winner, Eddie Palmieri, Grammy Award winner, Sarah Elizabeth Charles, who I think is going to be one soon, since we brought up the Grammys today. I have an interview with them after this one, but the point is that we have such incredible practitioners in this space that are doing it, but also we're bringing in this entire cadre of younger developing artists, that are, teens and 20 somethings, to also in this moment to be able to benefit from the knowledge and the things that we've learned through building this platform. So yeah, Stretch Music is a lot of things. Yeah, it exists in a lot of different spaces, but initially it was an attempt at genre blindness and sound as a means of strengthening the dialogue between disparate cultural groups of music. I think in the short, what would be really, really fun, I mean really, really fun, would be to actually really get with, I've known Stephen Bruner for years. We call him Thundercat outside, but his approach and his sound, what they're doing with harmony, the approach to the bass, it's so original and unique what it is that he's doing and the way that he's doing it. And, we've been friends for many years. He played gigs with my bands. That's almost 12, 13 years ago. Some of the tours that he did with us and his brother, Ronald Bruner, who is one of the most stellar drummers in the history of this music. So I think playing with them would be a lot of fun, just because, it's like like you see like those pickup games in like after the NBA season is over, and it's like somebody rolls a ball out in the gym, and it's like Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James, and all these guys are in the same room together. I think it would have that sort of feeling and energy to it. So it'd be fun to play with those guys, or for them to come and play with us some more. I think in terms of a record, though, I've worked with Tom York. I did the Atoms of Peace music with him. But I would be really interested to see what a record would sound like of mine if he produced it, right? To see what his ideas and feelings about how we, do what it is that we do. But for someone that I haven't worked with at all, yeah, I'd have to say, like a J. Cole or a Kendrick Lamar, maybe Jay Electronica. Because we're both New Orleanians, and I think we can express things from that are rooted in the cultural energy of where we come from, in ways that people don't actually mark as the cultural energy from where we come from. So I think that would be a deeply interesting document to be able to make. And I think lastly, yeah, like if I could really just have my wish, I would say Andre 3000. Just because, yeah, you just don't get any. That's the type of cool that doesn't come off. Rob and I have been friends for 22 years, playing together. We met in a Astoria Jazz Festival when I was a kid. And he was playing with Russell Malone's band. I was playing with my Uncle Donald's band. We were both teenagers. I might have been maybe 13 or 14, maybe 17, 18. And I'll never forget him taking it to a room of all of these master level musicians and letting them know that, he had ideas and feelings about things, and that he was going to prove those ideas through his hands and his mind. And just being floored by that energy and that sort of gravitas, even as a teenager. And obviously we work together in many capacities, but I think because he's a guy that gets lauded for R&B music and the contemporary sound and progressive R&B and these sort of things, it's easy for people to walk away from the fact that he's also arguably one of the greatest pianists to ever play music, right? So it's you begin to understand that that sort of energy in his mindset, like the more you watch him play piano, the more you'll see what you're talking about as well. And so to see his humor and the other facets of his personality also come out, and how he expresses himself and communicates with musicians on the bandstand, there's nothing like that, because part of what you see is that the instrument and the things that we're doing are always an extension of our humanity first, how we are as people. And so Robert is one of the clearest examples of that I've folks that I've met in my life, and certainly my brother. So I'm glad you brought him up. I'm going to give a shout out to Sarah Elizabeth Charles, who is, in my opinion, one of the most riveting and captivating artists that we have on the planet now, and beyond overdue for all of the light and the energy that she has built to be reciprocated to her. So I'm going to give her a shout out and Fusicology. I am grateful for giving me the opportunity to give a shout out to such an amazing artist and you guys as well. So very grateful. Thank you.